And I've found you are never alone. This is one of the greatest fears people have. They think when they die they're going to be alone, going into the great unknown. That's not what happens. You are never alone.
I'm Sally Knopp. This is Miracles of Consciousness Radio. That's Dolores Cannon, and we are in part 2 of Life After Death. Not alone, but who is surrounding us? You might be surprised. Let's get into it. One of the best things I loved about Dolores Cannon and being a QHHT practitioner is learning that we are not alone at the point of death, and oftentimes we might feel that way. We can become so isolated in life that we begin to not feel the energies, those subtle, beautiful energies around us. But when we go into a point of relaxation, we might feel the touch of a loved one when nobody else is in the room. We might feel a sudden wave of warmth and love when we're at the point of drifting off to sleep. And those are the ones who are on the other side caring for us. They could be our guides. They could be just loved ones who are still with us and giving us that reassurance. Now, when we talk about we are never alone, I've got a lot of stories that I could share with you as a QHHT practitioner. But I think the one that I want to share with you is my own personal experience. I was 29 years old when my dad was diagnosed with bone cancer. The moment I realized that he was not going to be with us very long, I was devastated. I could not imagine my life without my dad. I had one of the most loving, kindest fathers on the planet who probably spoiled me just a little bit too much. But losing him was going to be devastating. And yet, he showed me how to die. And why I share the story with you is even though I tried to shoulder and be brave and not give in to the negative emotion of crying in front of my dad, begging him to stay, I would say things to him like, "Dad, I'm not going to help you die. I'm going to help you get well." Well, that was the wrong thing to say. It was the wrong thing to even think. And yet here I was. And I kept thinking, he's going to be so alone. Well, that's the difference between being 29 and 64 years old. I've got a vast array of experiences now, and it helps with being, trained in Dolores Cannon's QHHT. Because not only have I had my own personal experiences, I've talked with hundreds of people who have gone through losing somebody and then doing a soul-to-soul connection and having the conversation with them and having miraculous transformations, not only in their lives, but also in the lives on the other side. Oh, it doesn't begin or end here. Anytime that you heal of something yourself, it sends a shockwave out to the universe. And anybody that's affected by that same energy will also get that healing, including your loved ones on the other side. Healing doesn't stop when you stop here. Now let me get back to my dad. My dad, he would tease me as he's laying on his deathbed. And he would say, I'd be alone with him. He'd say, "I see Jesus." My dad was not a religious person. And yet he's saying, "I see Jesus." And of course I jump out of the chair and I'm saying, "What are you saying, Dad? Should I call a nurse?" Just that. And he would just wink at me. He was already at peace with transitioning. And one of our relatives actually leaned in one day because he was in bone cancer and he was heavily drugged just to keep the pain down, but leaned in and said something. I don't even remember the right words that he said, but the comment was he opened up his eyes, looked the family member in their eyes, and said that Charlie, my uncle, was sitting in the chair right there. He's been there all day. And then he just smiled. And then he closed his eyes. The thing that I was always worried about was that when we die, it just ends. And that's the difference between now and then. But he also was at peace. And he was dealing with one of the most traumatic diagnoses that anybody could ever receive, bone cancer, because it's so painful. In order just to survive until the day you take your last breath, oftentimes, well, back then, I don't know what it's like now. This is 30-some years ago. Back then, it was just keeping you sedated because they didn't have a lot that they could do at that time. Now, when he got to the point of transition, what was so beautiful was that as I was standing there holding his hand, and next to me was my mom, and the other side of my mom was my sister, and we were all there. We were all holding his hand, and I was crying, no, 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 no. And my mom said, it's okay. It's okay. He can let go. He was struggling to stay in his body when I was saying, no, no, no. Just like Dolores said, it's not the person transitioning to the other side. It's our own anguish we become focused on. And I was there. I was focused on my pain, not the fact that the man was dying there in the most horrific way possible, in a most painful way possible. You know, I was focused on me. But Dad, you can't leave me. And when my mom said, and this was a solid marriage, they loved each other, they were happy, they held hands up until the very end. They were married a long time. And she said, it's okay. It's okay. He can let go. It's all right. It's all right. He's okay. As soon as she said that, he had the most amazing look on his face. He actually smiled, and for the first time in months, I saw him completely relax, and he was smiling. And I could tell there was energy in the room, even then, even back then. And I thought I was going to be devastated. And at that time, it was in July. It was July 19th, 1989. And it was raining. It was pouring down rain. And I remember letting go and feeling, wait a minute, what are my feelings here? And then I turned around and looked out the window, and I saw the rain was pouring. And I saw on the road below the hospital window that people were going on with their lives. And I was like, why is this going on? My world had changed forever. And I went back to focusing on me. The fact that my father just gave me the greatest lesson in dying escaped me then. And so, but it didn't escape me fully, because I remember sitting down and taking account of what just took place. And I remember as I sat down in the chair, and he's lying there, and my mom's talking to the nurse, and I don't know, my sister, I lose sight of her. I begin to feel this absolute warmth that just began to penetrate me. It was almost as if the sun was shining on me. You know, the warmth of how the sun makes you feel. Even though it was warm, it was a warmth of relaxation. It was a warmth of complete peacefulness. It didn't make me hot and uncomfortable. It was a bathing of peacefulness. And I knew right then and there, that was Dad giving me a hug. I knew that my uncle, who used to call me shitbird of all things because I was such a naughty little thing, they were both there comforting me. And I felt that energy wrap around me. I knew in that moment, when we cross over, it is beautiful. Unless you just die suddenly or what have you. But that point of leaving your body is peaceful and can be beautiful. And those that are around you, if they are just in a space of allowing, because I had given up, so I was in this, I can't fight anymore. I lose the strength to stand. And as soon as I was in that space of letting go, of trying to control the situation, I could feel my father. Now, I want to get a little bit more into Dolores Cannon because there's some other things that I want to touch on. But I think what is important at the outset of this message, what I love about this video, is that she talks about her own experiences when we learned about life after death, and what I've learned in my own personal experiences, and also I'll share with some of my own client experiences. Now, let me roll this a little bit.
And interfere. They can only...
All right, so let me just kind of sum up. This is where I've got it queued up. So when she's talking about we are never alone, it could be our loved ones, it could be our guardian angels. We are never alone. And so she goes through the litmus test of who those guides are. It can be our guides, our angels. It could be somebody, our loved one. But the thing that we must understand is that we are assigned these guardian angels or a guardian at the time of birth, and they are with us at the time of death. However, if you do not acknowledge them, if you do not invite them in, they can't interfere. And so this is kind of what she's talking about right here. So let's go with it.
only help if you ask for help. And if you do, boy, do they take over. But sometimes it can be a deceased relative that is assigned to you.
So even though the deceased relative was with my dad, he wasn't with him for a lifetime. That was his brother-in-law, but they had the best time together. Oh, sorry. I will leave the link in the description box below so you can review the full video. But I just want to touch on that.
Be your guardian angel. But you do have one. And if your life gets a little complicated, you may have more than one. You can have as many as 4, all taking care of different things. And if your life takes a sudden turn in a different direction, sometimes these guides will change places, and another one will come in that has more expertise in your field that you're going into. So you always have somebody there. So whenever you actually die and leave the body, you'll always have someone, I call them the greeters. Someone will come to meet you and take you where you're supposed to go. Now, all of you have probably been with somebody dying in a hospital and they see unseen people around the bed. Have you ever had that happen? Usually it's deceased relatives. They see them standing around the bed. This is very real. The doctors and the nurses try to say, well, it's just the drugs or the oxygen deprivation because they're dying. No, it's very real. And I've had other nurses say it happens a lot, that they will see people there, and you notice they're always very happy. So-and-so is here, and they know they're going to go with them.
That's exactly what I was telling you that happened all those years ago. I didn't know who Dolores Cannon was when I was 29 years old. I was not familiar with, quote, near-death experiences. And yet we both went through something very profound in that moment. Now, when the doctors say, well, it's, they don't do as much now. I mean, now we're getting a better understanding of consciousness. But back then, it was like, just trying to find any information on near-death experiences or death experiences was a bit of a challenge. But they would always say it's the brain chemistry, it's the dying brain. And my question that kept me going was the question, why is it that in near-death experiences or death experiences are people only bringing up people who had died before them? If your brain chemistry is dying, it should be a jumbled mess. It could be anybody. It could be Santa Claus, just a completely mythical person. It could be, the talking donkey, if it were just a dying brain in chaos. But that's never the case. So what happens is it's your loved one, or as you said, greeters. I love this. Let's get into a little bit more of it. Let's go.
Husband, relative, or whatever it is. So if they aren't there, the guide or guardian angel will be there. But you'll always have somebody to take you where you're supposed to go. So then they're taken to the other side. Now, usually when I'm talking to an audience, I say, how many of you have ever had near-death experiences? There's always people in the audience that say they have had near-death experiences. I don't care what the doctors say, it's very, very real. That I've had enough proof of it in my work, I know it's very real. But in most of the near-death experiences, the person either going through a tunnel or they're going out of their body, they are going toward a huge light. And they never reach that light. They usually are turned back before they get to that light. Usually there's somebody there who says, are you sure you want to go? You have a choice, but maybe it'd be better if you go back. Your family needs you. Things like that. But sometimes there's someone there to give you a choice if you want to return or do you really want to go on. It's your decision. But whenever they decide to go back, they never go all the way to that bright light. I found out what that bright light is. This is why they don't actually die, because they don't go all the way. The bright light is a huge energy source. You may even want to call it God if you want to, but it's a powerful energy source. And when you actually do leave your body and die, you go through that light. And when you go through that light, the silver cord is severed at that time. You're all attached with a silver cord, our spirit, which is the real you, and the body the entire time you're alive. Because every night you go out of your body. Everybody does.
So that is true. So I'll give you just another example of this. And this happened many years later. This happened actually, I think about 2 years ago for myself. My mom passed away. And of course I was really close to my mom. And so it was quite devastating losing her. And the strangest thing is I'm going through this whole healing. I thought I was healed. I thought it was, gone through the enlightenment period and blah, blah, blah. You know what? Just as soon as you think you've accomplished something, the universe says, wait a minute, you haven't quite learned this yet. And so it sort of brings us in. So when my mom passed away, I was just like really devastated. And it was about 4 years after she passed away. I was asleep one night, and then I woke up and I heard the water running in the bathroom. And I'm like, why is the water running in the bathroom? I looked over to my husband. He was asleep. He wasn't up in the bathroom. So I got up and I went to the bathroom, and the door was shut, and I opened the door just ever so gently, and I could peek around, and who was there but my mom? My mom was standing there and she was brushing her teeth, but there was somebody else next to her. And I noticed the person standing next to her. I saw the figure, and it was female, but I didn't acknowledge it. I'm like, Mom, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I must have had a dream that you had died. I can't believe this. Mom, I'm so happy to see you. Please let me hug you. And I gave her a hug, and it felt so real. And then she goes, I want you to meet my mom. And I turn and I look, and my eyes hit her about her neck. And as I'm lifting my eyes up, I wake up. Before I see her face, I wake up. And I'm not in the bathroom. I'm in my bed. And I know a lot of you have had that. And so when we looked at this through QHHT, because a lot of our clients will come to us because they've had this experience with their own loved ones, and they want to know, was that just something I imagined, or was that something real? And I will tell you, and Dolores would tell you if she was still here, that was a real event that actually took place. So when she's talking about that cord, that for me and for you, if you've had that experience, is an out-of-body experience. You are leaving your body. You are in an altered state or a higher frequency. You are in that frequency that they can meet you at. So they're vibrating at one frequency. They're bringing their vibration down. You, when you're in that lighter state, can come up a little bit, and that's a meeting place. So that was actually real, and we see it with our QHHT people. So if you are interested, is that real or Memorex? If you remember the commercial from way back, it was real. So if you've had that and it felt very real, know that that was a real visitation. That is a point where they can come to you in a way that's non-scary. You know, when you feel like you're waking up and you're discovering them, it's non-threatening. And when they can make it feel very real and you wake up, it's like, no, that was real. And it was very real, according to what we've learned in QHHT in here. Let's look a little bit more.
The spirit, the real you, imagine how bored it would get sitting around waiting for the body to wake up. The body's what gets tired. The real you doesn't. And so it's sitting around waiting for you to get up. Okay, let's get on with it. As soon as the body goes to sleep, you're out of there, having all kinds of adventures. You're going to the spirit side, you're talking to your guides and your masters and getting instructions, or you're off anywhere you want to go in the world, seeing people, looking in on them, whatever you want to do, or you can go off to other planets, other dimensions. You do this every night, but you don't know it because, well, you're not supposed to know it for one thing, it'd be too confusing. But the only way you remember is if you have dreams of flying or dreams of strange, unfamiliar places. So we're off having all these adventures every night. And in toward morning, when it's time to get back to the body, we are connected with the silver cord the whole time. You're reeled in, so to speak. They reel you back in to where you're back in the body again. Then the body has to wake up and you're ready to continue your daily work. So whenever you actually die, you go through this energy source. At that time, the silver cord is severed immediately by the energy. When that happens, you cannot return to the body again. That's the spark of life. Once that spark of life has left the body, it begins to deteriorate immediately.
So let me kind of recap what she said here. So she was talking about you're not supposed to remember. That is true. The part talking about earlier was a visitation, and we'll get into that later. But what she's talking about here, why don't I remember these events every single night? And no, you're not supposed to, because you're supposed to come in blind. She would say, you can't take a test with the answers laying there in front of you. So you can go to the other side and you can get some counseling with your guides, whoever your guides are. And when I'm saying the other side, it's just in a different frequency, just a different frequency. And that's where you exit your body and you get out and you get this instruction. This is what we're told in QHHT doing this type of work. And also we find this with people who've had near-death experiences. It really marries up quite well. And so the difference between the visitation dreams are truly the ones that feel real and you remember. But when you leave your body, and you do it every night, especially when you go into that delta state, you are not in your body. And that delta state usually takes place about 20 minutes a night. Most people think it's when they're in their dream state. And we're finding that's not necessarily the case. The exiting of the body is actually during the delta state. And you're out, you're getting instructions. Remember, time is different in the other realm. And so it's not going to be linear like here. So 20 minutes could be 2 weeks. But you're getting this information so you can intuit how to get through whatever thing that you're going through. Now, how are you listening to the information that you secured while you're in your out-of-body experience? Well, that's what your emotions are for. And that's when people start talking about being in alignment. Being in alignment means you're not in a fearful place, period. Being in alignment is having the good thoughts and the good emotions. Now, that can be really tough to do. I mean, we can get beat up. Trust me, I worked in corporate America. I got beat up quite a bit. And, talk about anxiety. I was the poster child for anxiety. I had all kinds of anxiety. I was truly the cat hanging from the ceiling. But I also noticed the more I focused on the negative, the fearful things, the more out of alignment or the worse my life became. To the point where I had a period in my life which was a complete train wreck. Okay? So I could have stopped that at any time had I listened to my emotions. I can remember as I'm heading into that train wreck and not listening to my inner compass, as I was sitting at home working one day, again in my corporate world job. And I was thinking, okay, I'm going to do plan A. And that felt like tight. My body felt super tight, like, don't do that. And then I'd say, oh, I'm going to do plan B. And it was just like, whoa, yeah, Well, guess what? As Dolores Cannon talks about, that monkey mind, or she calls it Mr. Stupid, I call it monkey mind, says, yeah, but that won't be as much fun. This other thing would be a lot more fun. Let's go do that. Well, going to do that turned out to be my train wreck. And so you don't want to go there. So you have to listen to that inner compass, because when you are getting those downloads from your guides, from your guardian angels, from your deceased loved ones, whoever they are for you, you're going to feel that in how your body reacts. Is it feeling tight? The answer is no. I'm going off track. If I think of this, I feel very light, very yes. That is alignment. And this is what she talks about over and over. Now, she doesn't say a lot of this in this particular video. I at least have the benefit of going through her classes, and a lot of that has been disclosed in our classes. But I also have my own clients who sort of have brought me through. It doesn't happen with one client. It never would be that. It would be great if it would be that easy. But you get a piece here and a piece there, and it's really cool how it all lays out. So let's go a little bit longer, because I feel like there's another message here that I want to make sure that you all hear in this session. So let's roll it.
You ever watch someone die, something's gone, it's left. At that point, the body begins to deteriorate. Then you're on the other side and you cannot come back. The only way you have ghosts, you have people coming back and giving messages, apparitions, but it's not the actual person, because they can't come back into the body again.
All right, yeah, that's the part, and I'm going to leave her right there. But this has happened to me recently with a client. When that energetic cord is severed, that silver cord, and you cannot come back. I have a client who ended up dying in World War II, and we were having trouble sort of figuring out. It's been a while, because the way this death took place, it was a bit like it had so many layers to it, and it was trying to figure out, is this coming from my imagination because it was this convoluted? Is it coming from his imagination? Because when you're reading energy, if you're not very careful, if you don't ask, is this an imprint energy or a blueprint energy, it can be a jumbled mess. And so, and I often say, when you're doing this work, especially on my end, and we're tuning in, it's like tuning into a far off radio station. And you're listening to a radio show that's an hour long, but you get like 2 minutes of that. And then you have to say, okay, this is what happened. And so there were some things, and I will be talking with somebody later about this. So please hit the subscribe button. I don't want to give away too much, but just enough. We're going to get into this a lot. And if you hit the subscribe button, you'll be notified. And this is going to be what happens when you die suddenly and you don't know you're dead. And then you reincarnate. What happens then? And this is that example. So in his particular case, when he died on the battlefield during World War II, it was like blinking of an eye. And so he never got a chance to complete his mission. And so as he's, when he dies, he doesn't know he's dead because he didn't feel he's dead. He just was here and gone. And from what I could tell, it's like an artillery shell. So as he's trying to figure this out, nobody's responding to him. Nobody's responding to him. And he gets so frustrated. Why is nobody responding to me? He follows his I don't want to say comrades, it's communists. He was an American soldier. He goes to Birch's Garden. That was the objective, is to get there in the 7th Army. And he gets there, but he doesn't get there in physical form because he dies. He dies before that, like a month before meeting that objective. But he still feels as though he is with his people. Now, when that's taking place, he's not seeing his guardians. He's not seeing his guide because he's so honed in on being the soldier, staying with his unit, and going to the objective, and getting frustrated that nobody's talking to him until one day he actually is to the point where his body's starting to relax, or his etheric body, not his physical body because it's destroyed. His etheric body is beginning to kind of lower that vibration a little bit. Instead of being, wound up, he begins to see that light. And in that light are his, quote, greeters. And as he's going up to the light, he's deciding, wait a minute, I have got to get back to my unit. And before they can get him fully transitioned over to the other side, he's jumping into a new life form. And so sometimes people who are, quote, haunted could be haunted by themselves, actually, by their own higher self, not getting to the point where they can fully process through the death experience and fully transition over. Now, his guides are trying to guide him, complete the mission. So for him, we have found, and it's going to be very interesting because we are going to document this, and I hope that you guys will subscribe and stay tuned for this, because we're going to walk through that healing process. And because if you all remember when I talk about energy healing or doing even this type of work, and even Dolores will say, not everybody will be healed. And the reason for not being able to heal somebody energetically or even on a QHHT session is because the soul has to do something. It has to make a connection from the mind to the whatever it is it's trying to get to accomplish. Now, we've done a lot with this fella, and he's done well, but he also has to complete his mission. And now, there was an actual book that was written, and I can't remember what the name of it is. I will try to find it and leave it in the description box below so you can all sort of figure that out. But it was a young boy who said James 3. Just look up James 3 and reincarnation. Look that up on YouTube, and that will tell you the story. But in order for his nightmares to stop, he died in World War II as well. But before he could let it go, he had to understand what had happened. Because when you're coming back into this new body, you may have pieces of information that comes with you, but there is no framework for you to put it in, because as a 2-year-old child, you can't express, hey, by the way, when I was a pilot flying off a carrier, and I crashed because I had an artillery hit to my, to my plane. What context is that in? So that is a really great story, and I'm going to try to bring that up and we can talk about that too. Anyway, there is so much we can get into. And I am going to do part 3 on Dolores Cannon and life after death, because there's so much that we can learn from this, and so much that I've learned doing this practice with my own clients. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this particular video. Please give it a thumbs up. And if you are interested in more stories, please hit the subscribe button. Anyway, thanks for watching, and get out there and ignite the superhuman in you.